What up, folks? Chilling here in my front room, playing some video games, tending a fire. It's stupid cold out. But I have been wanting to make a video. I've had a couple of unsuccessful attempted takes. And finally, I think I've got enough of a particular type of pattern that I can make a topical video. Finally. Interesting things that happened tonight. Live. Let's see. Ted Cruz was called a liar by Tucker Carlson live on Fox. Tim Pool was swatted live on Timcast IRL. Basically, what happened with Cruz was a few days ago he made a statement. He referred to the upcoming anniversary of the Capitol raid, which, by the way, was conducted mostly by confidential informants and federal agents in plainclothes. They got a guy by the last name of Epps that even Tucker asked Cruz about. Epps was at a rally the day before, and he had told people they need to go inside the Capitol. On the day of, he was right at the front line at the point where the breach occurred. At the time that the breach occurred, he whispered into somebody else's ear, and then he shouts, "Everybody push forward, we're going in." That man incited what they're calling an insurrection. He certainly incited violence. Third item, before I forget, Rudkowski calls out Brandon Tatum on just following orders, also live. So anyways, Cruz stated that the anniversary of the Capitol raid and talking about the heinousness of terrorists that were attacking the Capitol Police or whatever, well, unless you can prove that it was actually Antifa or BLM, which are terrorist organizations, doing those attacks, if they were just people, whether they were patsies or federal agents, either A, you've got to admit that these federal agencies are also terrorist organizations, or you've got to recognize that it's completely fallacious to call anyone who attacks a police officer a terrorist. There is a specific definition, which has not been altered yet, for terrorism. And what it talks about is using violence to promote an ideology by inspiring fear and thus conformity to that ideology. So, like, bullshitting people about a virus and going through the 4 steps of mass psychosis, basically trying to turn the world into the next Nazi Germany. Why you would want to do that, I can't even imagine, other than really nefarious reasons. But that's what they did the last 2 years as well. So Tucker called Cruz out for this, and he says, yeah, but you're insinuating, you're playing into their hand that the people, the normal people who were there at the Capitol were also terrorists. And he goes, well, no, but I always say that people who attack cops are terrorists. And I misspoke, and it was a mistake. And Tucker's like, I don't believe that. It's a lie. You told that lie. I believe you told that lie consciously. And Cruz tries to backpedal and doesn't really succeed at it. He realizes that there's no winning this argument because he was, in fact, wrong. Tucker points out the fact that he was at one point a Supreme Court nominee, that he has argued in front of the Supreme Court. He's one of the most legally educated and astute minds in the Senate at this time. And he really ought to should have known better, right? So then Tucker calls him out further for saying that anyone who attacks a police officer is a terrorist. He says, I'm sorry, man, that's dangerous rhetoric as well. Legally speaking, you're a criminal. It's aggravated assault. You attacked a cop. But you're not a terrorist unless you're a member of a terrorist organization. So, Timcast had Officer Brandon Tatum on. Yesterday, they had Marjorie Taylor Greene on. Today, about 45 minutes to an hour into, or no, what was it? It said it was like 8:51 by their time, so 7. Yeah, it was about almost an hour into the show. The police just entered the compound where Tim has his office building located, entered the building in exigent circumstances and began searching because they had been given a 911 call claiming that 2 people had been shot and one person was going to kill himself. It turned out not to be the case, but it all occurred within the show. Tim now has instructed Lydia that if this ever happens again, then make sure you get the room cam that they've installed pointed at who's coming into the room. So if it's cops or whatever, if it's on the live stream, people can identify. Secondly, after that, the entire conversation of the show turned to cops, whether or not their searches are legal, warrants and probable cause, That Tatum, tell you what, he really, really loves the taste of boot polish, doesn't he? Yeah, I get that he was a cop. Yeah, I get he's got that perspective and that bias, but he 100% defended just following orders. He says that if something is the law, we elected the politicians, we voted for them, they made the laws, we have to go with the laws. And it's like, okay, except that slavery was a law, slavery was legal. The Holocaust, there were laws. That was legal. That's why the Nuremberg Code exists. The Nuremberg defense, which is an invalid defense saying, well, I committed atrocity, but I was just following orders. Luke pointed that out. Tatum tries to say that that's not the case here in America, and that because we voted on laws and it's not dictatorship or whatever, which, come on, let's be real, there are probably, I want to say, a good 5 times as many anomalous, questionable, probably invalid votes then there is a margin of victory number of votes for the nationwide election. And because people were protesting this fact, and it was not being allowed to have it stay in court, that was Tatum's other thing. But you got to get them through the courts. You got to get at it through the law. What happens when you're like, hey, they broke the law, and the court says, we ain't doing nothing about it? It's the law, though. You voted for the law. You see what I'm saying? That Tatum dude's a clown. So, yeah, today is Fed Day. It's not Freedom Day. It's not Insurrection Day. It's Fed Day. The federal government baited people into entering the Capitol. Federal agents disguised as protesters told people this is what we're going to do. The federal government incited the insurrection against itself as an excuse to ignore any and all concerns about the legitimacy or validity of the election in 2020. And as such, ramrodded a president through who is now destroying the country. Good job, guys. And as Officer Tatum, the hardcore Republican, cops in blue line, first responders, this dude is all, but it's the law. We voted for these people. The Patriot Act is a law. That curtails constitutional rights in the name of fighting terror. All they have to do is say, so-and-so's a terrorist, and they can use the Patriot Act. Oh, is that what happened on January 6th? They call them terrorists, so they have the, oh my goodness, well, guess what else? 2012, 2013, 2016, National Defense Authorization Acts, signed by the president at the time, included Smith Modernization, which repealed the 47 Smith Modernization Act, which said that propaganda could not be used against American citizens. It's now been modernized into propaganda can be used about on American citizens in cases of national security. So when they tried to say that Trump was a national security threat, that allowed them to legally lie in the media, to present propaganda, fictitious narratives. And the pandemic response was because of national security as well, allowing them to just propagandize. And every time that they run out of juice for whatever their story narrative is, they come up with a new excuse to national security, legal excuse, propagandize. They just keep doing it. It's resulting in mass psychosis. People are literally being driven crazy. And it's not even like this is a new thing. The Russians knew about this after Stalin's time. The world in general, trying to figure out what the hell happened in Nazi Germany, came up with the 4-step process that leads to mass formation psychosis. This is a term that we've had since the 50s. It is not a right-wing talking point. It is not a new idea. This is a step-by-step process of how a demoralized country falls under the power of a megalomaniac who then promises them unrealistic things which they then believe because their brains are softened up because of all the propaganda and demoralization. And once this has happened, you basically can't fix them. They are permanently this way. Their brains over time will have grown into the thought process, literally adding synapses for this type of thinking. That's where we're at now. January 6th certainly didn't help. That election certainly didn't help. All of the fake news, propaganda, and media narratives certainly didn't help. Calling out politicians who play into the thing because they're obviously part of it, that kind of helps. straight out and civilly saying, okay, man, but you're a former cop who's saying that just following orders is a valid excuse. I'm not going to accept that. Nobody else in that studio accepted it, and Tatum tried to keep being like, yeah, but I'm right, because I'm right. And it's like, bro, I'm waiting for you to pull the race card. Because you can't win that argument about whether or not the Nuremberg defense is valid or not. It's not a valid defense. It's just not. If you commit an atrocity, if you violate somebody's rights, you can't just say, but I was just doing what I was told. He tried to argue that it's not about the individual cops taking responsibility for knowing the Constitution. It's about how their top-down orders come, the guidance and advice that comes to the police departments and city councils, municipalities, sheriff's county deputies and whatnot, through the state, through the DOJ, except that in a lot of these things, they do not receive any guidance other than what is said on the television. And so then they have to figure out what they're going to do. And oftentimes, because they're not that smart, because most people who are in city government and most people who are in law enforcement are not that smart, they don't care. They don't know. They get given an order. They follow order. That's Nuremberg, if they're violating somebody's rights. Tatum tried to say it was law that they were enforcing, and Luke very correctly said, no, these are edicts and mandates, these are not law. Well, yeah, but we gave them emergency powers. Who did? In some of their cases, they gave themselves emergency powers after the fact. That's not legal. Oh, it's a law, though, so you got to go through it through the law. You take them to court, and the court says, we're not going to hear your case, sorry. Same courts that are allowing them to screw up and get a mistrial and a redo for Ghislaine Maxwell, which will allow her to walk free and further not name any names. That's the same court system. That's the laws. That's the government that we voted for that we got to follow, right? Which is the same kind of mentality that caused people to do absolutely nothing when they started loading people onto train cars almost 100 years ago. It's stupid. It's idiotic. But here's the thing. The mass psychosis is not a political spectrum thing. It is people who are susceptible to it thing. People with strong principles can be affected. People with weak principles certainly can be affected. But the people with strong principles, it depends on how they're affected. A guy like Tatum, you would think he would know better, but the fact is that the back the blue mentality is exactly the same as ACAB. For those who don't know, that stands for all cops are bastards. People who think that all cops are bad, period, are just polar duality opposites of the back the blue people, the thin blue line. They go, it's cops, man. They got a hard job. You got to, okay, but they swear an oath. They must understand the oath. And if you swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, the rights of the civilians whom you protect and whom you serve, you goddamn well better know the Constitution. And you goddamn well better know where court rulings have been wrong, where laws push the limits and you actually don't have power there. Because you could be liable for civil suits later too. And that's the other thing that Mr. Tatum keeps talking about is like, well, yeah, but I mean, some of these 28-year cops and whatever, they got a pension to think about. Bro, fuck your pension. I don't have a pension. I will never have a pension. I can give a shit about your fucking pension. Seriously. If they're telling you to do something that's wrong, that you know is wrong, and you do it anyway, congratulations, you're a fucking Nazi. You're a fascist. Cops who just blindly follow orders, that's how that happens. So look at it now. They're segregating population. People are socially isolated. There is free-floating anxiety. And there are these nonsensical authorities saying, we have a singular solution to fix everything. Just do as we say. And right now the estimate is about 35% of the population with no respect to political ideology. 35% of the population is enthralled by this psychosis at the moment. And that is a very, very dangerous amount of people to be walking around trying to conduct their lives while simultaneously being batshit and not realizing it. As the great Mark Twain once said, it is far easier to fool someone than to ever convince them that they've been fooled. I've been saying this for a while now. I've also been saying for quite a while now that these logical inconsistencies are going to result in some violent outbursts eventually. There are going to be people just savage attacking people with crazy eyes, not knowing why, having meltdowns. It already happens, but it's going to get worse. Worse and worse. What can we do about this? Keep your head out of the sand. Pay attention to what's going on. But this does not mean watch the news. The news is part of the problem. You need to cultivate sources. This means taking the time to review what people say and not just, well, I can't tell. How can I tell? It's fucking simple. Get on Google. Google curates their results. Get on DuckDuckGo. Compare the two. Are the results curated? Okay. Between the two, can you find where one source who is very mainstream and very large appears to be hiding information? Something they don't want you to know. There is a better than average chance, for sure, that that's something you ought to know. Although, it must also be known that they will put stuff out and then block it to make people who are into that mentality automatically, again, without thinking. This is why staying in your present mode, staying in thought, actively cognating stuff, not just going into heuristics, into autopilot, spacing off and bumbling through life. This is what gets people brainwashed. This is what allows things like fascism and Nazism to happen. People in the Soviet Union and in China in the last 100 years who disagreed with the government and said, this is bullshit, ended up getting arrested. The soldiers and police who did that were just following orders. It came from the top down. There was advice from the government on how to handle the threat to society. And apparently the threat to society in their mind was anybody with free will. Over 100 million people are estimated to have died in the last century just because of those two countries. Not to mention the 6 million in Germany. And more than that, that's just the Jews that they counted being able to know that those were killed. That doesn't necessarily include people of other ethnicities that were also exterminated. What can we do about it? Stay alert, stay aware, recognize the signs, and don't delude yourself into thinking, oh no, that can't happen here. Oh no, it's not a thing. Oh no, the fact that everybody here is basically armed is a real easy way. No, because what it is they'll start keeping track of the people that have weapons, and then they will start coming for those people one by one. And it is possible for them to outnumber them. It is possible that a lot of people will surrender their firearms if asked to, if they do a mandatory buyback or just a grab. And yes, of course, there will be lots of people that don't. And there will be a significant reduction in law enforcement resources after that. But unless you're willing to go that far, if they come to you and say, hey, we're taking your gun, be like, okay, one bullet at a time. That's the only way to go about it. Because otherwise, what you're looking at is laying down your weapons, bowing to fascism, to Nazism, to totalitarian authoritarianism of any sort, where they say, we will control every aspect of your life, including what you believe and think, how you act. While saying, well, but it's better to be alive. Is it? Is it better to be alive and be completely enslaved than to be deceased and not have to worry about any of that? The expression is, better to die on your feet than live on your knees. Live free or die, right? I'm not saying we should go out and act proactively. I'm saying if it comes to us, we should defend. Seriously. Make them regret it. Try and hamstring the effort, because if they eventually run out of people to come and lock folks up, they can't do that. And no, I am not being over dramatic about this. It is happening in New York. It is happening in Canada. It is happening in Austria and Germany and Australia. They're just locking people up. Now, the people who disagree with it are out protesting, but they've already been disarmed. They've already allowed it to go too far, and they're going to have to attempt to vote fascists out of office. How do you think that's going to go? Do we have a country? Not really sure. We got people with weapons, the monopoly on violence, as it were. Little shiny badges that proclaim themselves to be in charge, going around telling people that this is the case. But other than that, do we really have a country at this time? No, not really. Until our government is replaced with people who are integral and have principles and want what's best for the people in a real way, not in a very narcissistic, facade. We want people to think that we do good things. No. Doing good things is even better than people just thinking you do good things. Because if people just think you do good things and you don't do good things, you're kind of a piece of shit and two-faced. Whereas if what you do is good and people can see it, that's great, because now they can know that you're doing good things, but you're actually doing good things. Doing good things does not include arresting people, violating their constitutional rights for mandates and edicts that are not law, playing into the fomentors of the psychosis's game any of that. It's not good. It's not good things to do. The people who perpetuate those are not necessarily good people. Because I'm sorry, even if you're neutral, even if you're a useful idiot, if you lack the principles, the moral fiber, the guts yourself to take a stand, you are nothing. You do not matter. And you're a piece of shit. So, yeah, happy Fed Day. Happy fake insurrection day. Happy excuse to ignore concerns about the legitimacy of an election day. Happy buyer's remorse day. Happy how does it feel, folks? Those of you who voted for that guy and said, no, we want him. Anyone's better than Trump. How does it feel? How's it going? Is it improved at all over what we had before? The gas is like twice as much per gallon. Food costs are already up. They've been up. Most people didn't notice that because they were too busy clucking and pro-clutching over the January 6th insurrection last year and accusing anyone who thought it was hilarious or a good idea, or even the folks that were saying, bro, that's a complete and total psyop. Making those people feel crazy occupied their time more so than thinking about the fact that prices were already going up. Gas prices spiked the day that Biden got in office. Come on, man.